There we go. So I'm going to record. Now I'm going to share. Perfect. And then if you have questions, just put them in the chat and I will be monitoring that the best I can. Lindy's going to look and also interject if there's something important. So just be muted, and then there are lots of places where I've inserted the possibility of asking a question. So either put it in the chat or just wait and ask at a good moment. And also I'd love everybody to put their email in the chat. And that way, if you've just joined from the link, I know how to thank you, send you class notes afterwards, and a link to the recording if you need that. So I'd love for you guys to put your name and email into the chat. Okay, so this is me. We're going to talk about Introduction to Homeopathy today. My name is Alexis White. I have certified in classical homeopathy, and I have a practice in San Anselmo, specializing in women's healthcare and self-care, but I do treat every member of the family except the family pet. I have a friend that I refer the pets to. So today we're going to start by talking about homeopathy. We're actually going to start by talking about what homeopathy is not. So homeopathy is a specific system of medicine that follows specific principles. It is distinct from, and it is not, naturopathy, herbalism, acupuncture, or any other form of complementary medicine. In homeopathy, the medicines are prepared in a special and unique particular way that is different from all other forms of medicine. So something like marigold, which is calendula, you've probably all bought a diaper cream made from calendula. That is an herbal preparation of calendula, but we would use a homeopathic preparation of calendula, which makes a slightly different medicine, though it does have cross purposes. So it is distinct from all other forms of natural medicine. Some homeopathy basics are that it is energetic medicine using minute diluted doses. It's gentle with no side effects. It's safe for all ages and conditions. Everybody from your baby to your elderly aunt with immune problems, anyone can use homeopathy and it's safe. It's very inexpensive, relatively speaking, compared to allopathic medications or going to the hospital for some kind of chronic disease. It's non-toxic, it's green medicine. It's widely available at health food stores and online. It's easy to use, to practice, and the books that you need are inexpensive and easily available. And it's based on simple principles that anyone can learn, that you all are going to learn tonight. So we'll start by talking about where it all began. So it began with Samuel Hahnemann. This is a statue of Samuel Hahnemann from Washington, D.C., where this is actually at a corner near the White House. And he was living in the 18th and 19th century. You can see he lived to be almost 100 years old. He was German. And he was a physician and also a chemist, a linguist, and ultimately a translator. You can imagine practicing medicine in the late 18th century was crude, of course, compared to how we practice today. And the medicines that were in use were often more traumatic than the illnesses that they treated. And he ultimately decided that he just couldn't deal with being a physician anymore. And he turned to translation of medical texts to support his family because he found being a doctor to be so difficult. So while translating, I realize what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to change to this. While translating a medical text about therapies in use at that time in the 18th century and theories about why these treatments worked, he came across a section about cinchona bark, which was at that time a well-known treatment for malaria, a successful treatment for malaria. And the text stated that the reason that cinchona bark worked to cure malaria was that it fortified the stomach and that it was bitter and astringent. And this seemed really illogical to Hahnemann. Based on his knowledge of medicines, he was a very smart man. And by way of experiment, he decided to dose himself with cinchona bark as if he were sick to see the results. And what happened was that he developed symptoms that very much resembled the symptoms of malaria. The symptoms quickly subsided, and then they returned with each new dose of cinchona bark. So it was like he was giving himself artificial malaria that would then subside when the medicine wore off. So Hahnemann, knowing that cinchona bark cures malaria, concluded from his experiment that the reason that it worked was that it caused similar symptoms when given to a healthy person versus fortifying the stomach or having qualities of being bitter and astringent, which many plants do. So he had uncovered in this experiment the first basic principle of homeopathy, the law of similars. And he experimented with many different substances, finding their artificial disease pictures, like cinchona bark looks like malaria. So he experimented with many other substances to find their pictures, including many medicines of that time, especially toxic medicines like mercury, arsenic, and lots of toxic plants that were in use at the time, but they would make people really sick. These medicines would cause equal or worse problems than they cured. And he was anxious to find a way to use these healing properties, but without the toxic properties. So mercury, for example, was a very common treatment for syphilis. And it would rid you of syphilis, but the mercury toxicity was a whole other issue that would then shorten your life because you would then have mercury poisoning. So he developed a way to create these medicines by potentizing the substances. So he would start with these raw materials and he would potentize them, which was a process that took him many years to develop. It wasn't just, oh, let me just throw this together. It took him 10,000 tries, like Thomas Edison with the light bulb. It took him 10,000 times to find the right way of diluting and succussing these remedies, these substances, in order to remove the toxicity but maintain the healing properties. So in the end, the process that he came up with was to start with the natural substance in a liquid form, which we see here in the image called the mother tincture. He would add 1 drop of that to 99 drops of water in a vial, and then he would shake the bottle. And that's called succussing. That's what that little symbol that looks like a big W is, that he would shake it. And then he would take it 1 drop from that vial and put it in another vial of 99 drops of water. And then he would succuss that. And through this process is how he discovered how he could maintain that healing property while diluting that toxic property. So the end result was an effective medicine that didn't have any toxic effects. And each medicine had an artificial disease picture or symptoms that it caused in healthy people that could point to the natural disease that it would cure. And through this process of preparation, Hahnemann discovered the second principle of homeopathy, which we now call the minimum dose, which is that we use the minimum amount of a substance it takes to cure a disease. So he started with cinchona bark, and eventually he had a pharmacy of about 100 remedies, some of which are our most well-known remedies of today. Here we see sulfur, phosphorus, silica, aurum, which is made from gold. We have belladonna, ignatia, pulsatilla, and calcarb, which is made from the lining of an oyster shell. So going back for a moment to this first principle of homeopathy, the law of similars. Well, let me see first if there are any questions. You can just unmute yourself if you have any questions so far. Okay, no. So we'll go to the law of similars. So the law of similars states a substance that causes in a healthy person symptoms similar to those of a disease state can cure a sick person in that disease state. So, in our example, a substance that causes, in Hahnemann, artificial symptoms similar to those of malaria can cure a patient who has malaria. So we can translate that from Hahnemann's direct experience with his experiments into how this law of similars comes about. And the way that we put it now, which is a lot simpler to say, is like cures like. So the cinchona bark cures malaria because they both share the same symptoms. And how it applies to the practice of homeopathy is that we match a patient's symptoms to the known symptoms of a remedy. Those symptoms of the patient and the symptoms of the remedy should be the same. So, for example, here's an example of how like cures like plays out in real life. So a bee sting, which we've all had, we all know what a bee sting feels like and looks like. Here's a picture of a bee sting. It has these common symptoms. It's red, it's hot, it's swollen, it's got stinging, burning pain. So what we need when we have a bee sting is to find a remedy with those symptoms, and the symptoms of the bee sting will be neutralized. So then we find the remedy Apis mellifica, which is actually made from a bee. And we see that the artificial disease picture of Apis is swellings after stings or bites, stinging pain, hives with burning, stinging, and itching, redness of skin with sensitivity, edematous swellings, and it's a specific for insect stings and bites. So we can see that the symptoms of the sting are the same as the symptoms that are expressed by the remedy, and we give Apis, which relieves the pain, swelling, and redness in a few minutes. So that's sort of your basic, very simple example of how like cures like works. So Hahnemann started with just about 100 remedies, and now there are over 3,000 homeopathic remedies. Each one has its own unique artificial disease picture, in quotes, which allows us to treat a vast number of diseases, conditions, and injuries. Remedies are made from a lot of different things, many common minerals, salt, sand, sulfur, plants like marigold and daisy, and so many plants, the redwood tree, and any little moss and bush you could imagine, and just a few remedies made from animal products, from the milk or venom of animals. Arnica is perhaps the most widely known remedy, and sulfur is the remedy that has the most symptoms and applications in our materia medica. It has the biggest entry in the encyclopedia. So homeopathy is energetic medicine. If we go back to the basics of homeopathy, that was the first thing I said. So what does that mean, energetic medicine? It means that when you take the remedy, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't have an action like an antibiotic that would kill bacteria, or an antacid, which would change the stomach acid, the pH in your stomach, to become more basic and not as acidic. It doesn't do anything on that level. It stimulates your body's own natural healing ability. Your body wants to be in homeostasis. It wants to be healthy. It knows how to bring itself into health and balance. It's just that sometimes it gets stuck, or some external factor comes in and prevents it from being 100% in balance. So the remedy stimulates your body to heal itself. And this is correcting an imbalance that it is at the root of the symptom or problem, rather than suppressing a symptom. So for example, in allopathic medicine, frequently medicines are given to suppress a symptom. Like if you have a fever and you take Tylenol, Tylenol suppresses the fever goes away, but as soon as the Tylenol wears off, 4 to 6 hours later, the fever returns, because the Tylenol has not treated the underlying problem about why you have a fever to begin with. It's just suppressed the fever temporarily. So remedies don't suppress, they actually correct the imbalance at the root of the problem, because they're allowing your body to make that change. So when would you use homeopathy? Of course, I think you would use homeopathy. I find it on a daily basis, I have the opportunity to use homeopathy. But of course, in basic first aid situations, and we're going to be talking today about remedies for use in basic first aid and injury situations, acute illness, trauma, grief. It's a wonderful option when there are limited or no allopathic medicines available to treat a problem, such as burns, sprains, fractures, colds, poison oak. All of the allopathic treatments available for those are simply to alleviate the discomfort that comes from those problems. It doesn't actually do anything to resolve those problems. So we might put calendula on poison oak, or we might take a decongestant for our cold, or we might take pain medication for a fracture or a sprain or a burn, but it's not doing anything to make the situation better. It's just making us able to tolerate that discomfort. Whereas remedies are actually making healing those problems. So you will be empowered to treat your family if you wish, and you will have options without going to the doctor for simple problems. So right now, you might feel like my only option is to go to the doctor because I don't know what else to do besides there's over-the-counter care and then there's going to the doctor. And this provides something in between where it is over the counter, but it gives you a lot more options of how to treat your family. So tonight's class is going to focus on remedies commonly used for injuries and first aid situations. And future classes, we're going to cover many different useful remedies for lots and lots of different situations that come up. So any questions so far about this?
I just put it in the chat, actually.
Oh, great.
It was about just a specific book or recommendation for reference.
Oh yeah, we're coming to that. Thank you for asking. For some reason, when I'm in this mode of my presentation, I can see that there's a chat, but I can't access it. So I'm going to need someone to read it to me. So yeah, we're going to talk about reference books very shortly.
Great.
I don't see it in the chat myself. I'm only seeing, I don't know why, but I'm not.
Okay. Well, I will be able to access that when I'm not in presentation mode.
Okay.
And you guys just, when I ask if you have questions, just feel free to unmute yourselves. That's great. So it's important to distinguish between chronic and acute. Today, we are learning how to use homeopathy in acute situations. And what does that mean? What is an acute situation? It means that it is an illness or an injury that will eventually resolve on its own, or it ends in death. So it's one or the other. Either it's going to resolve or you're not going to survive it. Examples of this are any kind of injury or trauma, a broken bone, a blunt force injury, an emotional trauma, an infectious disease like the flu, a cold, chickenpox, stomach flu, etc. Something like an external thing like poison oak or an insect sting, something like that. These are all acute things. So what is a chronic thing? A chronic disease is something that arises and does not resolve after a period of months or recurs periodically. For example, any kind of recurring or ongoing infection of any body system, like ear infections, sinus infections, respiratory infections, strep throat, throat infections, skin infections, any kind of menstrual problem, eczema, asthma, anxiety, depression, migraines. The list goes on and on. This is 7 things that out of hundreds of chronic issues. So we're not talking about treating chronic things, just treating acute things tonight. So at the end of this evening, you'll be able to treat simple acute issues with homeopathic remedies. And then for your chronic problems or the chronic problems of your family, you need to go to a professional homeopath like Lindy or like me or like the hundreds of other homeopaths that are available to you here in California. Okay, so just unmute yourself if you have any other questions. So here we go with the book. So this is what you need to practice homeopathy at home. You need, first of all, you need remedies, because in my experience, people usually get sick at 9 p.m. on a Friday night, just as the store closed. And, or you have no one at home with you, it's just you and your kid. And then you'd have to put them in the car and drive to the pharmacy and buy things while they're sick. So it's better to have your remedies on hand and at home. And a lot of people feel like, oh, I'll just buy them as I need them. And they buy them onesie, twosie, and then it's always the one that you don't have that you need. So the best thing is to buy a kit. This kit at Hahnemann Labs has 35 of the most common remedies for family use. And it's pretty inexpensive, much less expensive than buying them one at a time. They have this kit in the shop at Pediatric Alternatives, so you can buy it there. And you can also buy individual remedies from Hahnemann Labs going to their website, or your local Whole Foods, Pharmaca, Nugget, all of these types of grocery stores carry homeopathic remedies. So it's important to have the remedies on hand for your middle of the night or weekend or midday application of remedies when the need arises. So the second thing you need is a book, because you can have the remedies, but if you don't have reference books, you won't know which remedy to give. So here, these are 3 books that I really like. Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicines by Dana Ullman. And I'm going to show this slide again at the end with the specifics. So not to worry, you don't have to write everything down right now. Complete Homeopathic Handbook by Miranda Castro, and Homeopathic Self-Care by Robert Ullman.
Alexis,
So these are,
can I ask a question about the remedies themselves?
yeah.
Hahnemann does make amazing remedies, but how do you feel about some of the other ones? The Boiron.
I think those are fine. Boiron makes their remedies a little bit differently than Samuel Hahnemann did, and that Hahnemann Labs makes them. But I use them also, and I find them to be effective, and they are easier to get. If you're ordering online, you might as well order from Hahnemann, but Boiron is also fine. And Washington Homeopathics is another homeopathic pharmacy online where you can order kits and individual remedies as well. They're on the East Coast. So the thing I like about Hahnemann Labs is that it's here in San Rafael. So not only is it close, but it's also a local business, a local family business. So I really like that as well. But remedies are remedies, and most of them work exactly the same as each other. So I like Hahnemann Labs for their kits, especially, I don't know a place where you can get a Boiron kit.
I don't either. And just one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Do remedies expire?
They do not expire.
Okay. Because they have expiration dates. Yeah.
They have expiration dates. They're required to have an expiration date because they're regulated by the FDA. And they're so they are required to have that. They're also required to have, I'll pull one out and show you. They're also required to have a statement about what they treat. So, oh, that's not a good example. Let me find a good example. Here is a remedy called Illumina, and it's from Hahnemann Labs, and it says that it treats headache. So it has to say what it treats, and it has to have an expiration date, but it doesn't expire, and it treats a lot more than a headache. I can tell you that, Illumina. So every one of them will say something on it. I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot to mention this later with common questions, because sometimes I'll say, go get yourself some sepia, and somebody will buy the Boiron tube and it says, hey, this treats headaches, but I'm taking it for nausea. So it's just labeled that way to satisfy the FDA. They don't expire, and they treat lots and lots of different conditions. So don't worry about what it says on the label. I also have this Homeopathy for Everyone, which is like a little 8-page handout that you can get. I can send it to you, or if you sign up for my notes, my newsletter, my blog on my website, you'll get immediate access to it, which describes how homeopathy works, how to dose, and it's all the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, but in one little pamphlet. And I'll have this resource page up again. So how does it work? How do we actually do it? And what you'll find across the board, 100% of all people who use homeopathy, including Lindy and me, will tell you that the hardest part about doing homeopathy is deciding which remedy to give. So it's all well and good, like cures like, we get it, we take the case, we read the books, but then we got to decide which one do we give. And that is by far the hardest part. And this is because homeopathic remedies are not assigned to an ailment like fever. If like, oh, I got a fever, I'm going to give Tylenol. There we go. Boom, done. One choice, or maybe Advil. I could choose one or the other. It's not like that. With remedies treat many types of problems, which means that you have to find the right constellation of symptoms, not just one thing that's written on the label. So the remedy is chosen based on the unique symptoms of the patient. Maybe the patient is you, maybe it's your child, maybe it's your husband, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your dog, maybe it's your mother-in-law. Doesn't matter. You just need to remember that it's based on the principle like cures like. So you find out what symptoms are present, you look them up in a book, and then you find a remedy that matches those symptoms the best. If we go back to this, the symptoms of the patient match the symptoms of the remedy. They should be the same. So if we start with how to become a good homeopath, there are certain qualities that you need to become a good homeopath, which are different than being a mother and different than being a patient going to the doctor. The first thing is that you need to start feeling confident. You need to have that confidence in order to say, I can figure this out. My kid has a cold or my kid has a sore throat. I can do it. I feel confident. I know my child better than anyone else. I'm a good healthcare provider. I can watch them very closely. I can see if they're improving or not improving. And with the skills that you learn here, you'll have that ability to treat your kids at home and never have to go to the doctor at all. Part of being a good homeopath is knowing when it's too severe. The illness is too severe for your abilities and it's time to go to the doctor or urgent care. So if you start to feel like you're over your head, it's too much, it's time to go to the doctor and get urgent care. So a story that I like to tell is that early in my life as a mother, before I was a homeopath, I was working with a homeopath and my son ate something weird. He had a lot of food allergies. And I called my homeopath, who actually worked with me through the night and told me the next day, we just got your kid through anaphylaxis. And I thought, wow, I'm really glad you didn't tell me that yesterday, because if you told me that yesterday, I would have just hung up and gone to the hospital. But my homeopath felt really confident. And then she did a house call the next day and he was fine. So that was the homeopath who was taking on that responsibility, but I would not have as a mother. You have to know when it's time to get help from a doctor. So part 2 of how to become a good homeopath, you need to understand that homeopathic medicines are different than allopathic medicines, as I've touched upon. Unlike allopathic medicines, homeopathic remedies have many uses. One single remedy can have the ability to cure anxiety, diarrhea, food poisoning, and influenza. This here is a little picture of a molecule of arsenic trioxide, which is Arsenicum album, which is a remedy that treats all of these things and many more. Another single remedy can cure acute trauma, panic attacks, and acute fevers and illnesses. This is a remedy, aconite, that we're going to learn about tonight. There is not one single use for each remedy. Like Imodium treats only diarrhea. Tylenol treats only fever and pain. It doesn't also treat anxiety and migraines and foot rashes. Whereas remedies have many, many, many different functions. So it's important to remember that you are using these medicines differently. So you need to think about these remedies like they're a character in a movie. Like here's Woody Allen, from Annie Hall. I don't know if you've all seen this movie, but Woody Allen is always a very neurotic, anxious, restless, cranky person who's freaking out about trying to cook a lobster here in this clip from Annie Hall. And you would recognize someone acting like that. And so when you're looking for a remedy or which remedy, you're looking for the behavior that matches what you see in your case. So if you see your patient, whether that's your child or your husband or whatever, being neurotic and anxious and restless and cranky, then you say, oh my gosh, look at that. I recognize that state. And that state is something like our Seneca album. And then you need to understand that each person will have their own way of expressing an illness or an injury. So maybe everyone in the family gets the flu, but each person is going to express that flu in a slightly different way. And you are looking for that unique expression. What makes their flu a little bit different? So 10 people with the flu could need 10 different remedies. And so even with that same illness, there are going to be differences in how they feel and the symptoms that they have and which thing is the worst. One person with the flu might say the worst thing is the aches. Another person might say it's how tired I am. Another person might say it's my sore throat, or it's my cough, or it's my headache, or it's my fever. It's going to be different for each person. So here is the rundown of how it works. First, your case taking. Second, remedy research and case analysis. Third, remedy plan. Fourth, assessment. So we're going to go through these each point. First, we have case taking. So ultimately, you are a detective. This is how I describe myself to the kids that I see in my practice. I say I'm like a cross between a detective and a doctor. Mostly I'm a detective. I'm looking for clues to find the remedy that fits you. So you want to be an excellent observer. Think of Sherlock Holmes and how he observes things so carefully. Remember that the name of the illness is not important. In allopathic medicine, the name of the illness points to the treatment. So we say, aha, I have pneumonia, I take antibiotics. But in homeopathy, the symptoms point to the treatment. So the name is fine. It's sometimes interesting. It's helpful to get to the right chapter in the book, but it's not an end point. We need to go from there and find all the symptoms. So you're going to observe the symptoms very carefully and note everything down, even things that don't seem related. And you're going to ask questions and make observations about all the specific symptoms of the main complaint. You're going to observe how the complaint or the person looks. Are they pale? Are they irritated? Is their face dusky red? Is their face dark? Do they look pinched? Do they look angry? Are they lethargic? So your observations are also important, including the subjective symptoms that the patient tells you. You're going to look at the time. When is it better and worse? The modalities. What makes the problem better and worse? This is what modality means. It means the thing that makes it better or worse. Like, oh, I have a sore throat, and when I have hot tea, it makes it better. Or no, I have an ice cold drink and that makes it better. That's the modality. And so that fleshes out the symptom. A sore throat is not enough. You need to know the sensation of that sore throat. Oh, it's worse on the right. It's better from a cold drink. I feel worse when I talk, but better when I laugh. All of these things are the descriptors that help us find the right remedy. So the sensation, that's generally a sensation of pain, but sometimes can be a sensation of tightness or congestion or something, but usually it's a type of pain. Like, is it sharp? Is it stinging? Is it burning? Is it like a cactus thorn in my throat? Is it like squeezing or like a band around my head? These are the sensations you want to ask about. What side is it? Is it left or the right? Does it alternate? Does it move around? And you want to look for symptoms that are unusual for the illness. So for example, a high fever generally leads to a lethargic patient. So if you have a person with a high fever, but they're hyperactive, this is going to be very unusual and going to be really important when you're finding your remedy. You're going to want to ask questions and make observations about what seemingly unconnected symptoms are occurring. I'm vomiting, but I also have a rash on my knee. Okay, everything is important. We write it all down. You want to ask what happened just before you got sick. This has been a critical question that has led me to many amazing healing experiences with my patients, because sometimes somebody had a scary experience and then the next day they woke up sick. Or sometimes people had an experience of dread or anticipation and then they woke up sick. Or they went out hiking. We'll talk about this later. They went out hiking and it was really freezing cold and windy and they forgot to bring a hat. And then they woke up the next day and they're sick. So all of these things can be clues about the remedy that's going to help them. You want to look at an alteration from normal behavior. So let's say you have a really vivacious, independent toddler who suddenly becomes weepy and clingy. That's a change from how they normally behave and is going to be really important when you're looking for the remedy for them. You want to look at mental emotional symptoms like their mood. Are they cranky? Do they refuse to answer your questions? That's a really good symptom when you're asking your husband, tell me how you feel, and he turns his back on you and faces the wall and refuses to answer your questions. Like, shut up, I don't want to answer your questions. This is great. That's a symptom. Refuses to answer questions. You're looking at desires and aversions, food mostly. Like, do they want lemonade or sparkly drinks or ice cream or juicy fruit? Are these things can all make a difference. Do they want company? Do they want to be alone? Which is preferable? Do they want company, but then they're irritable with you? Then you want to look at odd and paradoxical symptoms, things that are strange, rare, and peculiar is how we call it. Like one time I had a mom tell me that her daughter was very sick. She had eaten a bowl of pasta the night before. She woke up in the morning, she threw up, and it looked exactly like how it had looked in the bowl when she served it. Like in 12 hours, it didn't get digested at all. That's a really odd symptom. And so I used that and we found the right remedy. So everything matters. Everything is related. Do not discount anything, because your patient is reacting dynamically in their own unique way. And every symptom is the remedy speaking to you, is saying, this is what I need. The body is saying, this is what I need. And you just need to listen. And all the information you gather is the case. Any questions about that, about case taking?
This is kind of a big topic, but how did we figure out these oddball things that a certain remedy, when you give a certain remedies, it's for these symptoms? It's it's how did we figure that out?
Well, I think it goes back to that artificial disease picture. So Hahnemann took the cinchona bark, developed malaria-like symptoms. So of course he was clearly a very methodical German man, wrote down everything that he experienced. So this is what we do now, is we give remedies to healthy people, and they write down all their symptoms, and multiple people do it. It's like a double-blind trial. And we compile all those symptoms. Those are the proving symptoms. And then we also gather information from clinically cured symptoms. So let's say somebody comes in with the flu, they happen to throw up a full bowl of pasta that looked just like that. It was undigested. We gave them a remedy. It cured the flu and it cured the lack of digestion. So then suddenly that gets added to our materia medica in a cured clinical symptom. So we have it from both sides, from having the artificial disease picture clarified through the proving, and then also the sort of accidental symptoms that get cured. And this is now, 200 years of symptom gathering that we have. So we have a lot of information about what remedies do what. And of course, the older the remedy is, the more information we have. That remedy that I used was actually China, which is made from cinchona bark. So that remedy was was the first remedy, and has a lot of symptoms that it has cured over these 200 years. So we know a lot of very little detailed, particular, strange, rare symptoms that go with it.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, now to remedy research and case analysis. So here are the books that I mentioned before: Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicines, The Complete Homeopathy Handbook, and Homeopathic Self-Care. And you could take a screenshot of this, or I can send this to you later. I can send you these slides actually if you want. But these are 3 books I highly recommend. I think you can actually get these also at Pediatric Alternatives. And then these are actually screenshots from the first book, Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicines. So what you'll see is that if you forget everything I said to you in this lecture, it's right there in the book. See, the law of similars, case taking, selecting the right medicine. So you don't have to remember anything at all from this lecture. It's all going to be right there in the book in the middle of the night while you're looking at it. So the chapters are organized by illness in the book. They all look similar to this. Oh, here we have coughs and colds, and here we have digestive issues. Here we have allergies. Here we have women's health problems. You can see, so you can just go right to the chapter that's applicable to whatever your case involves. And then within that chapter, you're going to find descriptions of common remedies used for that problem. So let's say it's a bladder infection. You're going to find a list of remedies that is very commonly used for that. And then the differences between the remedies is going to be really clearly highlighted, or the strong symptoms that point to one remedy over another one are going to be clearly highlighted. And sometimes there are comparison charts. That's a real bonus. I love that. And then at the end of the book, there will be something called a materia medica, which is a fancy Latin word, which means encyclopedia, describing each remedy in more detail. So let's say that you've got a bladder infection, you think maybe, oh, Cantharis is going to work for this. And then you can look in the back and read a lot more about Cantharis, and then really flesh out whether this is going to match. So it's sort of an all-in-one, these books. So then in terms of the analysis, you're going to compare your case notes to what you read in the book. Now you got to know it's not going to be a perfect fit. You're never going to write down this case and then read exactly what it says in the book. And more than one remedy may seem to fit the case. So how do you pick which remedy to give? Well, first of all, the more symptoms you have, the more you've written down, the closer you're going to get to finding one remedy that matches. With very vague, general, few symptoms, it's going to be hard to pick. The more you have, the easier it'll be. So you're going to look for a remedy that has a match with the most symptoms, the strongest symptoms, and that means you ask the patient, so right now, which is the worst thing for you? Like, you might think, wow, I can see it's that sore throat, but they might say, no, it's how tired I am. So the strongest symptom that the patient feels subjectively is something you want to see match in the remedy. You want to see the unusual symptoms for the person. That would be the independent child that becomes weepy, and unusual symptoms for the illness. That is the hyperactive, fever-ridden child. You want to see the mental, emotional symptoms match. And you want to, any seemingly unrelated symptom that matches is always a good sign. So you're going to read about symptoms that are not present in your case. That's okay. Not all the symptoms in your case need to match, and your case doesn't have to have all the symptoms in the remedy. So there are going to be symptoms here and symptoms here that aren't there, but there's going to be a middle ground with some really good matching stuff. You're going to look for a similar picture where many symptoms match, and there'll be a few outliers that don't fit. So this goes back to good case taking. The more symptoms you have, the better the possibility of finding one remedy that fits and ruling out remedies that don't fit as well. Questions about that? Okay,
Just one
so
comment, Alexis.
yeah,
Your first case might be yourself
that's true.
because you kind of know yourself and you know what you're looking for. It's often difficult initially for a child or a family member, but when you start working with yourself and you realize you're lying in bed and you're sicker than a dog and you should not be moving and you're just all over the place, you're moving and you know that's really odd, and then you start looking for a remedy, a flu remedy that is better movement, and you might not have noticed that from someone else. So it's good to practice with yourself.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. And sometimes I find I forget to treat myself. I'll be sick and it'll take me 24 hours to remember that I could give myself a remedy. So, so don't be like me. Remember that you can treat yourself, and just have your books and your remedies handy and sitting out on the counter, and then you'll always remember that they're there. And it's true because you'll notice things about yourself that you might not think to ask someone else. And once you notice those kinds of things in yourself, you'll remember to ask about that. So then you might ask someone, are you feeling restless? Is it, is it hard to get comfortable? And so I think you're exactly right about that. So then you have your remedy plan, and your remedy plan is that you narrow your choices of remedies down to one remedy. Now, if you can't nail it down to one remedy, you're going to pick two, one to try and one is your backup. But you should pretty much narrow it down like, this is the one that I think fits the best. When in doubt, just try the one that seems the closest, because there's no downside. There's no side effect. There's no problem from the supposedly wrong remedy. There isn't really a wrong remedy. There's just the remedy that works and then everything else. Because what happens when you give the wrong remedy? Nothing, literally nothing. So there's no negative effect, but also there's no curative effect. So there's no reason not to try. There shouldn't be any worry about that. And one good thing that can happen is if you give the wrong remedy, the body says, the vital force says, hey, pay attention. And it might create a new symptom that points to the right remedy. So if you give a remedy and you feel like nothing happened, then you want to reassess and look for anything new that has arisen, because the vital force wants to tell you what the remedy is. So then the dosage, how often should you give the remedy? How many pellets should you give? How long should you wait before trying a different remedy? So we're going to go into this in more detail. So we need to go back to this second principle of homeopathy, which is the minimum dose. Use the minimum amount of a substance it takes to cure a disease. And dosing is situation specific. So it's, again, unlike allopathic medicine, where you take your antibiotic twice a day for 10 days and don't stop before, because then we'll become resistant to antibiotics. It's not like that. We take the remedy when it's needed at the potency that's needed, and we don't take it when it's not needed. So each time you give a remedy, it's situation specific, and we think, how quickly is it going to get used up? It's like gas in a car. So if your illness is slow and mild, it's like a really efficient car using the remedy. It's like a Toyota Prius getting 58 miles per gallon. It doesn't need to be filled up very often. But if your illness is severe and fast acting, it's like a Lamborghini getting 12 miles per gallon, and it needs to be filled up more often. So we have this spectrum of efficiency that goes from more efficient to less efficient. And when it's more efficient, less remedy is needed in terms of doses and potency. In a less efficient situation, more remedy is needed in terms of doses and potency. And so a less severe illness might be a cold, a skin rash, grief maybe, or a more severe illness might require more frequent dosing or a higher potency, like a severe illness or injury, or like croup or a burn or severe pain that might require faster applications than the less severe illness. So if we take this concept and we apply it, we say in a basic acute illness, got a cold, it's a runny nose and a sore throat and feeling under the weather, you might give a 30C potency 2 to 3 times a day for 2 days and then reassess or assess. You want to let it work overnight. Even if nothing has changed at bedtime, sleeping with the remedy can make a really big difference. Time and time again, I have seen that people will call me at 7 p.m. and say it's no different. And I say, just wait until the morning. And then there's a big change in the morning. So I like to say 48 hours before you change the remedy. If you see nothing in 48 hours, then that's the time to pick a different remedy. But even a small change can indicate something is happening, and then you want to stick with the remedy. In an urgent illness, you might give a 30C potency hourly and then assess in a few hours or at the end of the day. Hopefully you can include an overnight sleep if possible. In an emergency, you might repeat the remedy every 15 minutes and assess within the hour or on the way to the doctor or urgent care. Now, what kind of emergency might you treat? There aren't very many emergencies you're going to be treating because you're going to be going to the ER or to the urgent care, or at least to the doctor. But one situation that feels like an emergency that is not always an emergency, in fact, rarely is an emergency, is croup. And that is something that feels like an emergency and is treated like an emergency and then can be resolved very quickly. That is something that happens usually in the middle of the night, and it feels like an emergency because your child feels like they can't breathe, and then you feel like, you know, your child might die, and this is why it's an emergency. If there is a true emergency and you are on your way to the ER, of course you can give remedies while you're headed there. I've given remedies in an ambulance on the way to the hospital while I waited for the technician to not be looking so he wouldn't be mad that I was putting something in my kid's mouth. So there's no you can take your remedies with you to the hospital if you need to, especially if your child is anxious or scared. It's a perfect time to take remedies to help alleviate some of that stress. But in general, there are a few times you're going to be using emergent remedies in an emergency situation. I think I have too many question slides. Okay, so here's part 4, assessment. So when you are assessing, you're saying, okay, I gave the remedy, now it's the evening, now it's the next day, I let them sleep. What am I looking for? I'm looking for improvement in the chief complaint, in the mood and mental state, and the overall vitality and energy. It could be any one of these things, 2 of these things, or all 3 of these things. So one thing that I know Lindy sees all the time, and I see it too, is that let's say you've got a sick kid who's got a runny nose and a sore throat, and a fever, they're lethargic, they're feeling terrible, they're grumpy, they're weepy, they're clingy. You give the remedy, and suddenly they want to eat and drink, and they want to play, and they still have a runny nose, and they still have a little bit of a fever, but the mood, mental state, vitality, and energy are improved. That's cool. That means the remedy is working, and that sore throat and the fever and the runny nose are just going to catch up very soon. So you just keep on going. Any one of these things means there's improvement, and you continue on with the same remedy. So here's my
just one little thing about that. Sometimes, especially with fevers, I or others give remedies and expect the fever to go down. But often what I will see if a remedy is working, especially in a child, is they'll go to sleep. They were agitated, anxious, and they just go to sleep. The fever does what it does. Like you said, the runny nose does what it does. But if they can relax enough and go to sleep, I know the remedy's working.
That's exactly right. And I see that all the time too, is that when you go to sleep, that's a sign that the remedy is the right choice. So here's my little flow chart to follow. So when you're asking yourself, is there improvement? Yes, there's improvement. What do? Continue giving the same remedy and assessing twice a day until symptoms are gone or the patient feels 90% better. I feel like at 90%, the body can take it to the finish line. So then what if there's no improvement? You're going to reevaluate the case and you're going to ask, are there new symptoms? If there are, you're going to add the new symptoms to the case and give a new remedy that matches the new case with the new symptoms. Let's say no, there are no new symptoms. Then you're going to give your second choice remedy from the first analysis you did, because I'm sure there will be second and third choice remedies that you will have. Then you ask, then time passes, is there improvement? Yes, continue giving the same remedy. If no, you reevaluate the case and you ask, are there new symptoms? And this is how it goes. You just keep on evaluating and keep on case taking. And anything new gets added into the mix. You keep looking in the books. You say, aha, look at that. She wanted lemonade. It must be belladonna. Suddenly a new symptom will come that will point to the right remedy. So in terms of how many pellets to take, this is a question I get a lot. One pellet is one dose. Sometimes people feel like one pellet just is very unsatisfying. What if there's no remedy on that pellet? Then take 2 pellets. That's fine. 2 pellets is fine, but you really don't need more than that. Now, that being said, if your child drinks or eats the entire bottle of remedy, that's okay. Probably nothing is going to happen. But this is why remedies are so economical, is that we can buy a vial with 200 pellets in it and it can last for 200 doses. The remedy is sprayed onto, it's in a liquid form and it's sprayed onto these sugar pellets and then it dries. So every pellet has the remedy on the outside of the pellet. So that's why the remedy is on every single pellet. So 1 pellet is 1 dose. You're going to use 30C potencies most of the time. It's a low to medium potency. It's highly effective. High potencies should be recommended by a professional homeopath. And that would be potencies like 200C, 1M, 10M, anything above that. In this image I have here, you can see a range of potencies. The lowest potency here is a 6X. That's a very, very low potency. It's not that useful. 6C, also very low. Then we've got a 12C, a 30C, and then we see a 200CK, which means the same thing as a 200C. So don't worry about that. So you can see that they come in different colors so that you can pick the right potency. Always look at what the number is, and you're looking for 30. This is the best potency. Another little trick that I use a lot is that I'll take a pellet and put it in water, a glass of water, a mug of water, a bottle of water. Sometimes I get people to just get like a Crystal Geyser bottle and put a pellet in there, let the pellet dissolve, and then you have an entire bottle of remedy. Now, why would this be useful? It could be helpful if you only have a small number of pellets left of a particular remedy, or maybe everyone in your family needs the same remedy. And so everyone could take sips or spoonfuls from that glass or bottle. And so if you're going to dissolve a pellet in there, before you take it, you either stir or you bang the bottle like that before you take it. So here are some common questions. Why does a remedy not work? Well, most often it's because it wasn't the right remedy for the situation. The remedy and the case did not match. And so it was just like a miss. Also, another thing that can happen is the remedy itself could be compromised. Remedies, being energetic medicine, are subject to antidoting if they go through the X-ray machine at the airport. That's the biggest problem I see, is X-rayed remedies. If they get wet or too hot, like don't leave it in the glove box of your car. then sometimes if a very well indicated remedy fails to act, I'll say, go get a new bottle and try that and see if it works. And sometimes that has turned out to be the problem. People often ask me about antidotes. So, news on the street is that, all these things will antidote the homeopathic remedy that you're taking, and you have to avoid all these things. Um, the big ones are coffee, mint, menthol, chocolate, marijuana, traumas. In my experience, I don't see a lot of antidoting. There are some things that definitely do not antidote, and mint is one, and chocolate is another. I have seen these other things, antidote remedies, but it's pretty rare. So, did people stop drinking coffee when they come to my practice? No, they continue to drink coffee every single day. And I just say, take your remedy away from your coffee. So, don't worry about that. Also, there is the rule of not touching the pellets. Now, why is that? Because as I said, the remedy is sprayed on the outside of the pellet. So if you touch it with your finger, you have oil on your skin, just your regular body oil, and it can degrade that remedy, and then that can cause the remedies to not work. So instead, what we do is we pour them out of the packet or the vial into the lid or into a spoon or a little cup. And if you do too many, you just pour them back until you have the right amount, and then you just put it right into your mouth. And you put it into a clean mouth, which means usually I advise people to avoid eating and drinking for 10 minutes before and after the remedy, so that the remedy isn't competing with anything else like sriracha or jalapenos or sauerkraut or something in your mouth. It just gets to go in there and have its own experience in your body. That being said, sometimes people tell me, oh, haven't been taking my remedy because I always seem to have, brushed my teeth or eaten a bagel. And so if it's stopping you from taking the remedy, then forget about it. Any questions about all of that, or any additional questions that I didn't cover about things, little myths and ideas about homeopathy? All right, I'll keep going. So now we're going to go into some acute injury remedies and the applications for those remedies. So these are my favorite remedies. I love all remedies, but I have my favorites, and aconite is one of them. Aconite's a remedy I carry in my purse everywhere. The main uses for aconite are for fear and panic. And you might think, wow, why do I need to carry that around? Well, because you never know when you're going to be in a situation where you might need that. It's for acute trauma resulting in tremendous fear or panic. So this could be, let's say, there's an earthquake or a car accident, or you witness or you're the victim of some kind of trauma that makes it really hard for you to get back to your normal life, or even the next 5 minutes because something happened. Maybe it didn't happen to you, but you witnessed a car accident. It was really violent, and it traumatized you. Aconite will really help you process that and move on. The people who need aconite can have a tremendous fear of death and panic attacks. It could be a fear of flying or PTSD. For example, I had a client whose family lived on a street where there was a gas explosion a couple of doors down, and it was really, really scary. And the entire neighborhood was traumatized, and they all thought they were going to die. And they all needed aconite, and they needed that to process and get over it so that then they could not remain in that state of fear and panic, which sometimes we can get stuck in without a little bit of assistance. Additionally, aconite, as I talked about earlier in the talk, can treat acute illness, especially in the first 24 hours. And in particular, illnesses with a sudden onset or after exposure to cold wind. So let's say you go hiking on Mount Tam and it's freezing and windy, and then you wake up the next day and you have an ear infection, or you have a sore throat or a lung infection. In that first 24 hours, aconite is a wonderful remedy to use and I've seen it over and over, where you just quickly give aconite and it just nips that illness in the bud. Some additional characteristics of the remedy are that people tend to be restless and thirsty for cold drinks. And this is the first remedy I give in croup. So it's an amazing remedy for croup. Here's the second remedy I carry in my purse with me at all times, apis. It is, I think of it mostly for insect stings. It has many other uses, of course, but insect stings, especially bees and wasps, and that sting area, as we talked about earlier, is going to be hot, red, and swollen with stinging, burning pain. But it also treats anything that's hot and red and swollen with stinging, burning pain. It doesn't have to be an insect sting. It could be poison oak. It could be hives. It could be an allergic reaction. It could be sunburn. This is a remedy that I gave my son, who forgot to put on sunscreen when we went to Costa Rica. And he was swollen and red and in so much pain. It was the only remedy I had. I would not have thought to use it, but it was all I had. It was the closest I had, and it really made him better. So you can see that it isn't that apis is for stings, it's that apis has this artificial disease picture of hot, red, swollen, stinging, burning pain, and that's what it treats. And so it doesn't matter where that comes from or the origin of it, that's what it treats. Also, the place will be better from heat, worse from heat and better from cold. So somebody would want to put an ice pack on their insect sting, for example. And then additionally, it will look like edema. It'll be puffy, like a water balloon is the kind of the way those stings and areas look.
I once had an apis case of an older friend who had the worst conjunctivitis I've ever seen, puffy red eyes and kind of bubbly, almost ready to send him to the ophthalmologist. You know, I don't treat adults, right? And I said, well, let's just try one dose of apis. And he called me an hour later, poof, completely gone.
Yeah.
So it is profound when we see it working.
It is really profound. Absolutely. It's what makes this work worth it. So here's arnica, the third remedy I carry in my purse with me at all times. I think of it in general for bruises. It's for bruise-like situations. It's an injury to soft tissue, which includes injury like a concussion, which is the soft tissue of your brain. So I use this remedy for concussion. As Lindy and I were talking about before we started, we both see a lot of concussion cases. And soft tissue would be like your muscles, like you fell down. It's like blunt trauma rather than a puncture wound or a laceration. You're going to see bruising, hematoma. And because of that, it's excellent for post-surgery recovery. I give arnica to everyone after surgery because no matter what they do, no matter where they're doing surgery, there's always going to be trauma to those soft tissues for them to get to the place that they're doing the surgery. And there's always going to be bruising and hematomas and bleeding, and it's amazing. The sensation that arnica feels is very sore and bruised, like they've been beaten, and the bed can even feel too hard to lie in. So this would be the first remedy that I would give if there was a broken bone or a sprain or any kind of blunt injury, or, you know, I fell down on my bike and landed on, you know, a stump and got a massive bruise on my leg. So some additional characteristics of this remedy is a fear to be touched or approached. They don't want to be examined, and they say they're fine when it's obvious they're not. So this could happen, like, let's say I fell down on my mountain bike and hit a stump, and then somebody saw me and came over and were like, hey, are you okay? And I'd say, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Hey, do you want me to help you up? Do you need a doctor? Nope. Nope. I'm fine. Don't touch me. No, I'm really fine. So if I responded that way, that is another indication that I need arnica, because that's how the arnica patient feels, like, back off, don't touch me. Additionally, arnica is available in my preferred method, which is pellets, but it's also available in a tube as an ointment, or actually not an ointment, like a gel, which you can put on topically. Don't ever put that on broken skin. So sometimes you have two problems at once. Like if I fell on the stump and I also got a bunch of lacerations and my skin was cut, I would not put arnica on that, because even if I needed it for my bruising, I would want to take that orally instead.
I've had very good success with topical arnica with things that are itchy. And the only way I figured it out was it's all I had. I had a jellyfish sting. I've had poison oak that wasn't open, insect bites, and it's all I had. And it actually can be quite effective topically for itchy things.
That's very interesting. I didn't
I,
know that. That's
I
a
didn't
great tip. Thank you. Because I'll tell you, itchy things are really a problem. And these wound type things brings me to calendula, which is made from marigold. And the main uses for this remedy are for lacerations and open wounds. It comes most frequently in an ointment. So I put a little picture of that ointment here so you can see. I also have it in pellet form. It's not the easiest remedy to find. So if you or your family are prone to wounds, it might be prudent to order some to have on hand, because it's good for any kind of scrape or skin inflammation, raw inflamed wounds surrounded by redness. I think of it like the homeopathic Neosporin. It's got antiseptic and antibiotic properties. It really replaces Neosporin for me. Some people even have an allergic reaction to Neosporin, and I find calendula is very mild and very effective. So it comes as a pellet, a tincture, or an ointment. Sometimes if people have a really big area, like they got road rash from their bike or something, I can spray it on, because it can just sometimes be too much to put a whole bunch of ointment on your arms or your legs. So this is where you'd want to take it orally or do like a spray. So you can apply it topically to little things and then take it orally for big things. And I've given it to people who've had really infected stuff, and it clears it right up. This brings me to Cantharis, which is a remedy for burns. This is one of these remedies that really is a lifesaver. There are very few allopathic treatments for burns. Unless you're hospitalized, you pretty much just have to suffer through it. And Cantharis can treat any level of burn. I've written here 1st and 2nd degree burns. Of course, there's no reason not to give a Cantharis in a 3rd degree burn while you're on your way to the hospital. But it treats burns with excruciating pain. I had a situation with my son who was 18 months old. We were actually in the homeopath's office, ironically. He pulled on the lamp and the lampshade came off and the lamp fell on his neck. The light bulb fell right on his neck. And his instinct was to pinch that light bulb, and it burned his neck and shoulder. He got a 2nd degree burn. I had zero experience with burns, didn't know anything about it. The homeopath, of course, my son started screaming his head off, and the homeopath leapt up, got Cantharis in really high potency, threw some Cantharis in his mouth. I got in the car. It was an hour-long drive to my pediatrician. My son fell asleep, which goes back to what Lindy said about falling asleep. He fell asleep in the car, woke up when we got to the pediatrician's office, and then he just sat there while she put vitamin E ointment on the burn. And she said, this is basically all we can do. And he never cried again, ever. For the next 3 weeks that burn was healing, I just kept giving him Cantheris and he never cried. So we know, because he was only 18 months old, that he wasn't, was not a placebo effect. He did not know that he was getting a remedy to help it. It really took the pain away 100%, which to me is a life-changing quality. When I look at people who are suffering from burns, it's excruciating. This remedy also treats bladder infections with tremendous pain, because the quality of this remedy, what it really has is pain with itching, burning, and blisters. So it doesn't matter whether it's a skin burn or a bladder infection, that's the quality, is this tremendous pain. Cocculus is a remedy for motion sickness, vertigo, nausea at the thought or smell of food, headaches with nausea. It's another remedy I carry in my purse. It's a more recent addition since, I don't know if you do a lot of driving to the coast or when, you never know when someone's going to get car sick. So this is a great remedy for car sickness. They're worse from the sun, cold open air, exertion. They just want to lie still because they feel really sick. And one of the unusual things about this remedy is that a person can develop nausea and vertigo from loss of sleep due to night watching. Night watching is when you stay up all night or you cat nap because your child or a person you're caring for is sick and you can't just go to sleep. You have to be watching them all night. And that can make people feel some people are very affected by that loss of sleep. And some people can actually get vertigo from that. And this is an amazing remedy for that problem. So it's great for your basic car sickness, air sickness, any kind of motion sickness from a plane or whatever, as well as this bigger issue of loss of sleep.
And I know you said you don't treat animals, but animals who vomit in the car works very well.
Of course, that makes total sense, because we don't need special remedies for animals. You just need to be a special kind of homeopath to be able to understand what the symptoms of the animals are, because they can't tell us. We have to it's all in the observation. This is a wonderful remedy, Hypericum. I think of it for crush injuries. It's for injuries to nerve-rich areas like your fingers, your toes, your teeth, your coccyx, your spine. You get violent shooting pains. The injury I think of most often is shutting your finger in the car door, or like you're holding on to the door frame and then someone shuts the door on your finger, or maybe your teenager slams the door and pinches your finger. It's like the arnica of the nerves. So just quickly get your Hypericum. I have personally shut my finger in the car door. It's amazing. One time I was at the gym and I dropped one of the 25-pound weights onto my thumbnail, right in the middle of my thumbnail. And of course I was at the gym, so I had to get home to get the remedy. And then I was actually able to go back to work. Another random fact, interesting, that it also treats phantom limb pain because of that relationship of the nerves. Ledum is our puncture wound remedy, which means puncture wounds of any kind: an animal bite, an insect sting, a vaccination, stabbed in the back, any kind of puncture wound at all. We think of Ledum. Step on a rusty nail. The injured area, unlike apis, which you might get an insect sting, the injured area is purple or white. It's puffy with an indented center like a donut, and cold. So you can see that's a very different picture than that red hot, swollen apis picture. This is a specific for tick bites. This is what I give to everybody. I give them a dose of Ledum if they get bitten by a tick. And it is chilly, but worse from heat. So the affected area is going to feel better from a cold application, from an ice pack, rather than from warmth, even though it is cold to the touch. And this is also a remedy that I have given people after the COVID vaccine or any vaccine. There are a couple of remedies for vaccines. Somebody was asking about that earlier, but Lidum is one of the remedies for that. Then we have Rus toxicodendron, which we shorten to say Rus tox, which is a little more user-friendly. So many uses for Rus tox. The main ones are a rash and sprains, and then I would add on to that, it also treats the flu. Mainly, the main symptoms are burning, itching, skin eruptions, right? Like poison oak. But it could be eczema, it could be shingles, it could be any kind of rash. It doesn't have to be poison oak, but it's made from poison ivy. This is Rus toxicodendron, is the poison ivy plant. One way you'll know for sure this is the right remedy if it's better from very hot application. So if you get a washcloth, put it under super hot water, and then you put it on the rash and it feels better, that's a sure sign you need Rus tox. Also, it treats sprains and strains with tearing, shooting, stitching pains. Let's say you twist your ankle, for example. Rus tox is going to be great. You would feel sore and achy all over. This could be a strain from overexertion. You dug up a hedge in your yard, or you had the flu. This kind of sore, achy feeling with restlessness can either be from that or from being sick with the flu. We've all had that feeling. The stiffness and pain that you have, either with a sprain or arthritis, is worst with the first motion. Like you first get out of bed and it's like I'm so creaky, but then as you get going, you get better the more you move with that continued motion. That's another keynote symptom of Rus tox. Everything is better from heat and worse from cold in Rus tox. So additionally, Rus tox is often very restless and treats arthritis very well as cold sores. And then Ruta is like the sister remedy to Rus tox, made from rue. And this is going to be for sprains of a slightly different nature. They're ongoing. They fail to respond to arnica or Rus tox. You'll use it for repetitive stress injuries, and especially tendon disorders like tendinitis, bursitis, tendon and periosteum injuries. It has a great affinity for the tendons and ligaments. And the sensation is that bruised, sore, aching pains, also with restlessness. So you can see it looks a lot like Rus tox. So if you had a sprain, you would first give arnica, then you might try Rus tox, and if that didn't work, you could give Ruta. So it's very close to Rus tox. And then the final remedy we're going to talk about tonight is Symphytum for broken bones. This is the main use for Symphytum, is fractures. It promotes healing and rejoining of the bone and reduces the pain. It's made from comfrey, which is also known as bone set. So it has an herbal application that's very similar to the homeopathic application. And it's a specific for a black eye. So like if you get hit in the face with a soccer ball or something and it hits you right in the orbit of your eye and you get a black eye, Symphytum, it's like the arnica of the eye. So it's perfect for that. Any questions about these remedies or anything that we've talked about so far?
I have a question. Can you
Yeah.
can you see me? Okay. So I was just wondering, I know that you said for the dosage, one dosage is a pellet, but would there be a difference dosage wise for like my 4-year-old opposed to me?
No,
Okay.
it's the same
Okay.
for everyone.
Okay.
The only thing that I would say is that sometimes it can be hard to give a pellet to a baby. So that is a situation where I might say, if it was an infant, you might want to put the pellet in water and then do like drops of the water. Not because there's anything different about it, just that it can be hard, like an infant might, put the pellet out of their mouth or something.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
I can see there's another question in the chat. I'm sorry, I can't access the chat right now. So just go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you. I was just curious, is Ledum complementary to acupuncture treatment, or would that be contradictory?
You mean, so
Because of the needle.
got it. Mhm.
Yeah.
So let's just go back to the baseline, which is I have symptoms, so I'm looking for a remedy to treat my symptoms. But if you go to acupuncture, you're getting needles put in you, but then they come out and there's no problem, right?
Okay. Yeah,
So they're not a problem with
I
each
see.
other. And I think in general, acupuncture needles do not cause a problem. Sometimes they hurt when they
Right.
go in, but then, they either move them or it stops hurting. And
Right.
then, so it's more like, let's say I get bitten by a dog. That's going to be a problem that needs to be resolved. Or
Okay.
let's say I had a vaccination and I got a reaction to the vaccination locally on my skin. I'm putting in my hand, but it would be like in your arm. So I have a reaction. So if you don't have symptoms, you don't need a remedy. So
Okay.
we only are looking for the symptoms and then looking for the remedy that matches. So does that answer your question about
Yes,
acupuncture?
it helps me with how to think about it. Thank you.
Okay, good, sure. So we've talked about acute treatment, but that acute treatment is a small subset of how we use homeopathy in many different ways. We also use homeopathy chronically, as we talked about, and its role there is really to, if we think about what we've talked about tonight, how we want to see how we assess to see if a remedy has worked. We want to see the chief complaint get better. We want to see the mood get better. We want to see the energy and vitality get better. If we think of that little microcosm and we take it to the bigger picture, that's the same thing that we expect when we treat chronically. We want to restore harmony and balance to the whole person, to their chief complaint, to their mood and energy, to their vitality, to their outlook, to their mind, body, and spirit. So if you just take that little acute picture and you make it bigger, you can see how this is how we use homeopathy chronically. And we do it with using the same principle of like cures like, it just takes longer. And you need to go to a professional homeopath to treat these chronic issues. I have a whole list here of things that are potentially chronic issues, from chronic pain to menopause, menstrual issues, migraines, allergies, night terrors, low self-worth, anxiety. These are all things I see regularly in my practice, and homeopathy is amazing with all of these things. And so, just like I said, what you can expect is that it improves your chief complaint, your mental, emotional health, as well as your whole body health, and healing the actual systems, glands, and tissues directly. And then these are the things that we need in addition to homeopathy. Homeopathy can't do it all. You also need to remove obstacles to cure, like maybe you need to change something in your diet or your lifestyle or spiritually to find health. We need stress reduction. We need 8 hours of sleep. We need whole healthy foods. We need exercise and movement at least 30 minutes a day. We need playtime. We need connecting time, and we need radical downtime to have health. So I'm going to pull up my resources page for you again. But then I think what I'm going to do is, you guys can still see it, right? But now I can see the chat. So do you guys have any additional questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves because that was the end of my presentation.
I have another question, because right when you guys were talking about it, my son was going down for bedtime, so I missed some of it.
Sure.
You were someone had asked earlier, I think maybe it was Jen was talking about, like if you were to do remedies with vaccinations. And then I heard Lindy say that that would be pretty much like a whole class. I'm curious, is that the conclusion you guys came to, or
We haven't discussed that yet
Okay.
specifically. So I know Jen has some questions about that. So maybe Jen, why don't you ask your specific question about that and then we can address it.
Sure. I had just heard that there's specific remedies that go with specific vaccines, and so I was more curious about that, and which ones go with which. And Lindy said the name of them. I always say it wrong.
So the word nosode, that's
Nope.
the word that you're thinking. So a nosode is a remedy made from disease material. That's the definition of the word nosode. A sarcode is a remedy made from body tissue, healthy body tissue. So it's just the name of the remedy. So I'm trying to formulate an answer to your question. Let's see. So
Talking about homeoprophylaxis, or is she
it
talking?
sounds like you're not asking about how to replace vaccines with remedies. You're talking about after having a vaccination, is there a specific remedy that you could give for each particular vaccination?
Yes. Yes.
So going back to what I said a few minutes ago, we don't give a remedy unless there's a problem. So we don't take medicine if we're not sick, right? So the way that homeopathy works is that we look at the symptoms and then we find a remedy that matches those symptoms. So let's say that you get the MMR vaccine, but there's no problem. There's nothing to treat. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Let's say that you get the MMR vaccine and then your child starts losing their speech and losing the gains that they had made developmentally. And suddenly their life diverges and goes on a different track and they regress and they are never the same since getting that vaccine. Then they have symptoms and we can point to the vaccine as the moment in time when things changed. In that case, I would give a remedy made from the MMR vaccine. Now, is that called a nosode? I don't know. I think of a nosode as being tissue. I can't think of if there's a name for that kind of remedy, but
Isopathy? Would that be isopathy?
isopathy would be that would be treating it isopathically as opposed to homeopathically, because isopathy is the treatment is using the direct exact substance irrespective of the symptoms of that artificial disease picture that remedy creates, if that makes sense. I know it's like deep in the weeds philosophically. So if there's no problem from a vaccine, there's no reason to give a remedy. If there's a problem from a vaccine that can be where you can directly point at one particular vaccine that caused a problem, you could clear out that vaccine energy, that vaccine trauma by using the remedy made from that vaccine. And I have done that. You can also use other remedies that are more general for vaccinosis or vaccine issues. that are not, that are more like ledum or thuya, or silica, other remedies that treat problems arising from vaccine damage, or probable vaccine damage, that are not that remedies made from that specific vaccine. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yes, I think the other part of my question too is there something that makes perfect sense. So thank you so much. Is there something that you can take in preparation for to support via using homeopathy? If you know you're getting a vaccine, is there a way to support the system or your body and your systems vaccine specific?
I would say that that again, just going back to this principle, if there are no symptoms, there's nothing to treat. So, and because 99% of the time, this is how homeopathy works, the best thing to do is be as healthy as possible, have constitutional homeopathic treatment, um, be be have clean living, eat good food, have a really good nutritious diet, all of that. There is nothing to prepare
Okay.
you homeopathically.
I like to talk about it like make sure your detoxification pathways are working well before you get a vaccine. So if your kid has a problem with pooping, make sure that you've given them a little magnesium and there's a lot of water that they're drinking, so they're peeing a lot and that they're pooping well. You might give them Epsom salt baths before and after the vaccine to detoxify through the skin and do some dry skin brushing. Healthy diet like bone broth and healthy fats will have the liver work maximally for detoxification. So I'm just more specifically, like Alexa's saying, make sure that you're healthy before you have a vaccine.
Okay. Okay. It sounds like homeopathy is more reactive, right? It responds. Maybe reactive is not the right word. Responds to something. It's not some preventative or protective. It's does the opposite. It's the responding side.
I think that it isn't exactly how I guess reactive seems like a strange word, but I know what you mean.
That's why I
We
changed it.
Yeah, we are trying to, when symptoms are present, we can then ascertain the remedy. But because the symptoms are how we come to the treatment, if there are no symptoms, how can we know how to treat? Does that, so
Totally.
it's, yeah, so it is a response to symptoms that are arising. And I get this question a lot, especially about vaccines. Um, and I think that the best thing is exactly what Lindy said, like live clean, detox well, and then respond quickly if there's a problem.
But then to reiterate something that you said is that we know if it's the wrong remedy, nothing bad happens or nothing at all happens.
Right.
And perhaps that we know that a good if there were a vaccine reaction, a good remedy to use might be, like you just said, thuya or silica, or I forget what the third one was that you said.
Lead them.
So ledum. So does it cause harm to give a dose of thuya before you give a remedy or after you give a remedy? It's a question.
I don't think that it causes harm. I think that it just doesn't, I can't support it from a philosophical standpoint.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions about that? Got it. Any other questions, Tita or Daisy?
I don't have any other questions other than I was just wondering, do you think that you guys will try to do this on a more regular basis, or would you do that something like this outside of your practice where you would have just more Zoom calls?
Yeah, we're planning two more. We have two more planned where we're going to talk more in depth about remedies. And this is something that I do on a fairly regular basis, have webinars. So absolutely.
And bring
So I can,
cases. It's always fun if you come with, my child has this issue, or there was a flu and I tried this remedy and I wasn't sure if it worked. So we love that.
yeah,
And then we'll get an email from Pediatric Alternatives as usual. Okay.
that's
Yes.
right. And now that I have your email, I can keep you in the loop as well.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Are those dates
Wonderful.
already set?
Sorry, say that again.
Are those dates already set?
Yes, I can tell you the dates are March 29th. I thought I had it written here in my
They're in my calendar too.
March 29th and April. Oh, I know what it is. I actually have it ready in an email for you guys. I was going to send it to you. So I think it's April 27th or something. It's a Tuesday night, 4 weeks after March 29th. So those are the dates of the next two webinars.
Thank you.
Good. Well, thanks you guys so much. And I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to